Welcome in, everybody. Today, we're going to be asking the really hard question. Did Michael McKee actually stalk Monique Tepe, or has the story around him been twisted? Then I promise what we're going to get to is we're going to walk through what the family is now saying about the threats that Michael made against Monique. Stay tuned. Welcome into Motive.Means.Opportunity True Crime.
A forensic criminologist who's been writing about this very case. Laura, thank you so much for being on. I really appreciate this. Look, I spoke with the Tepe's brother-in-law a week ago, and it seemed as though there was no one on the radar for the family members as to who could have done something this awful. But now he's saying that there were these red flags, that Dr. McKee had threatened Monique Tepe's life when she was Monique McKee. And I just wonder, how red a flag is it when someone makes a death threat to the person they're married to?
Hi, Ashley, thank you so much for having me. Yes, so absolutely, the death threats in an intimate partner relationship are basically a huge warning sign, and it's always best to view them in context of it's shifting, like the conflict between them is shifting between emotional conflict to potentially a behavioral conflict where maybe an abuser is going to then move from just thinking about hurting the victim to actually acting, and that becomes lethal for a domestic violence homicide victim.
So the brother-in-law has stated that Michael McKee, Monique's ex-husband, threatened to kill her when they were together. Keep listening.
I mean, I suspect if there's going to be a trial, I mean, that's, obviously there can always be a plea bargain, as we saw in Koberger, but if there's going to be a trial, I sense that a lot of this stuff is going to come out in court, the things that were said, the things that were threatened, etc. And they matter to juries. But I was really taken by that wedding video, not just the words when she said wrong relationships and waterfalls of tears led me to you, Spencer, but she started to cry and continued to cry all the way through that. And I just wanted to get your professional assessment of that.
Yes, that struck me as well. And it struck me that the words that she chose, she said, bad bumble dates, wrong relationships. And she put the S on the end of it, Ashley. And I thought that was interesting where she said a wrong relationships. But, did she mean a wrong relationship? And that's one of the things I've been thinking about recently. In addition to that, then she said the last part of it was about the waterfall of tears. And so for me, it kind of the summarizing statement that kind of went through my mind was that she went on a journey, and there was a tremendous amount of emotional growth through trial and error, and that resulted in meaning to her, because she was saying, this wasn't worthless, this wasn't my journey mattered because it led me all the way to you. And it really struck me that she was so emotional and she was so grateful to be there with Spencer that day. That's how I perceived it.
This is truly such a sad, sad case. These this family, the Tepes, were truly madly in love, and you could tell. And this seemed to really infuriate Michael McKee. Just our condolences to the family. It's just the saddest, saddest situation. Let's keep watching.
One of the things that you wrote about the Tepe murders, Dr. Petler, is, quote, murder is conflict resolution for the offender. And I just want you to pull on that thread a bit.
Sure. That is something I've been talking about for a very, very long time throughout my career, simply because this is the type of situation that I specialize in. So, in domestic violence homicide, and the reason I'm using that analogy and those words is because the defendant in this case is the former intimate partner of Monique Tepe. And so it's possible that, of course, there's going to be a trial. But what they're saying is that they're alleging this person is responsible for their deaths, Monique and Spencer. And what I mean by conflict resolution is that murder is conflict resolution in that it resolves an internal conflict that's going on within the inside the offender, and this is just a blanket statement across the board for intimate partner homicide, and it doesn't make sense, but it to us maybe, but it makes sense to that person, the offender, him or herself. And so sometimes it can be years like this, and in these cases there is stalking, and of course all of these other lethality factors that go in, that we're looking at those variables when we have a situation like this. And as this case evolves, I think all of that will come to fruition for everyone so that they can see kind of what happened. But sometimes these types of cases, offenders keep things close to the vest and they never reveal why they might have done something to injure or kill victims, because that's how they maintain control, and that's how they continue to relive that emotional cathartic execution over and over and over again.
Thank you for.
Let's just keep digging deeper. Stick around. We're going to give credit where credit is due to the family friend, the family member, Rob Miller, who did the video recording on their wedding day, January 30th, 2021, in their home, Monique and Spencer Tepe in Columbus, Ohio. Watch the ceremony. Listen to the words we just heard that she said during the ceremony. Please say some prayers while we watch this video. Let's keep going.
And the families out there, thank you. The brooms and the bride, they want to say thank you very much for the attendance, and thank you for your contributions and happy thoughts. I'm going to start out with the little story. I was kind of taken back, when Monique approached me a couple weeks back and said, "Hey, Dad, I want you to do the ceremony for me." And she told me, "Hey, I think I found a guy that's just as good as you." I said, "Whoa." In the back of my mind, I'm thinking, wait a minute. We got to put this to the test. So, yeah, I did my research,
Now listen to her vows.
Special. I had quite a journey to get to you. Countless bad bumble dates, wrong relationships, and waterfalls of tears. But it was worth every cringing second because it led me to you. Throughout all of this, I knew that God was guiding me to my person, and that when I met him, it would be the most magical thing ever. And boy, is that an understatement. I finally found my lobster, and it honestly couldn't be a person with a more beautiful heart.
Truly sad. She says she had cringe-worthy experiences in order to meet Spencer Tepe. Stay tuned as we continue. Did Michael McKee really stalk Monique Tepe?
Divorce, about Monique and Dr. McKee's divorce back in 2017. So it's been about 8 years since they were divorced. And I've seen a lot of things online that I want to clear up, some misconceptions that people have about things that they've seen in the divorce filing, some misconceptions about, there's some new things that popped up in the filing from last year that may not be exactly what they appear. So I'm going to get into that with a divorce attorney in this episode and really go through everything that we can see about their divorce and what it might mean, especially when you look at the big picture of Dr. McKee now being charged with murdering his ex-wife Monique and her new husband Spencer. Also, we know that Dr. McKee is now being extradited. He had his initial court hearing in Illinois, since that is where he was arrested. He's not fighting extradition, and he is being sent back to Ohio to face these murder charges. And once he gets back to Ohio, we expect to learn more about what exactly police have on him. I mean, in the arrest affidavit, it was pretty basic in terms of them saying that a car connected to him was at the scene and also surveillance video, but there's surely more evidence they have now, especially since we now know that they upgraded the charges. Initially, they were just murder charges. They're now aggravated murder charges. So I'm going to get into that, but especially I'm going to dig into the divorce records in the case and what they could mean and really go through them in a very, very detailed way in this episode of Liane Investigates. There's actually one other thing I wanted to tell you guys about before I get to my interview. If you're wondering, I'm in the airport, by the way, because I'm traveling to Utah to work on a story about the Charlie Kirk murder, which I'll have more on later. You guys know I've been following that one. But there are some other developments with the Monique and Spencer Tepe murders. Spencer's brother-in-law has now told NBC News that their family quickly believed that Dr. McKee was somehow involved in their deaths and that he was, quote, this is what he said, quote, he was an emotionally abusive person when they were together. That is all I know. So that's...
Okay, we're going to go through that. We'll come back to Brian Enton. I want to bring you that story now. Let's just go through that together. Family member shares details about Monique Tepe's former marriage to suspect. Let's watch because...
Tonight, Spencer and Monique Tepe's brother-in-law tells NBC News when the family first learned the couple had been murdered, only one possible suspect came to mind, Monique's ex-husband, Michael McKee.
She was terrified because he had threatened her life on multiple occasions when they were married.
Rob Misla sharing with NBC News what he says Monique Tepe told him about her brief and troubled marriage to McKee. His account backed up by a second family member.
So she wasn't shy about talking to people about traumatic experiences that she had with her ex and just how emotionally abusive he was to her. It affected her to this day.
The vascular surgeon is now charged with 2 counts of aggravated murder. Officials allege he shot and killed the Tepes in their Columbus, Ohio home. Misla said
it affected her to this day. Wild. Absolutely wild.
As Monique and McKee abruptly divorced in 2017 after less than 2 years of marriage because Monique was so worried. Court documents cite incompatibility. Misla says he's unaware of whether he had made any recent threats.
Do you know if the abuse was ever physical?
I don't.
A public defender representing McKee says he intends to plead not guilty.
If any of us had known that these threats were actually grounded in possibility, we all would have acted differently.
Aaron McLaughlin, NBC News, Rockford, Illinois.
That is so sad to hear. If any of us had known that these threats were going on, we would have acted differently. That is so sad. Let's keep watching Brian Enton's deep dive.
Something new on the record from the brother-in-law. We had heard from an unnamed source in the family that they thought that it was Monique's ex, Dr. McKee, but now he's saying this on the record, according to NBC News, quote, he was an emotionally abusive person when they were together. That is all I know. Also, according to Fox, there was a downward spiral that was happening with Dr. McKee after I had actually found out that he was working in Nevada for a while. He was working in Nevada and also in California at one point, which some people that I was talking to were saying that was a little strange for his career path to be moving around so much. Fox News is reporting that there was a downward spiral that had to do with his job performance, basically saying that he had issues when he was working in Nevada. Let me find this. This person told Fox Digital that he basically had no experience working as a vascular surgeon when he was in Nevada, and that he was in a downward spiral that began after a series of alleged surgical mishaps, one of which was detailed in a lawsuit, which I had heard about in Nevada. This person told Fox, and they're not named, he was always nice. He was always kind kind, and he wasn't one of those that has these like emotional outbursts or anything like that within the operating room or when he gets into a stressful situation, but that it was reckless for those around McKee to continue allowing him to perform high-risk surgeries knowing his limitations. Why are you letting a guy that's a year and a half out of fellowship, 2 years, free reign to do these crazy cases? How come there's nobody putting a stop saying, what are you thinking of doing? The source told Fox Digital. So apparently when he was in Nevada, working in Nevada as a surgeon, there were definitely some bumps in the road. Okay, so I'm joined now by Ashley Frankel, who, full disclosure, is one of my best friends, and we've been best friends since middle school, really, right, Ashley?
Middle school.
Yeah, middle school. But she's also an amazing divorce attorney based in Miami. So she's the perfect person for me to talk to about the divorce of Michael McKee and Monique Tepe. And there's been, as you know, Ashley, there's been like a ton of rumors out there and speculation about a lot of things. So I wanted to just go through the divorce docket with you. And of course, we don't have all the supplemental materials. All of that is kind of locked out from public view, but there are some things that we can learn from looking at the docket and maybe clear up some of the rumors and misconceptions. So first of all, thank you, Ashley, for doing this with me.
Of course.
I appreciate it. I want to start, and we're going to work our way to the beginning of the divorce, and it looks like it was finalized in 2017. But one thing a lot of people actually are picking up on is that in the record, there are some lines, it looked like something new happened in June of last year. It says original copy of hearing notice that there was a continuance. So it goes from no activity, 2017, 2018, and then there's nothing. And then there's these lines that pop up in 2025, which a lot of people are thinking, gosh, did something happen to cause this? Was she complaining about something? Was there some kind of abuse happening? What do you think those lines are?
So full disclosure, I'm not licensed in Ohio. Every state has different laws. There's a lot of similarities between jurisdictions, but when I opened the docket, the first thing I saw was that the status of the case was closed. And typically if there was post-judgment activity going on, it would say something like reopened to reflect that, there was some sort of filing, either a petition or a motion. And that happens when someone, doesn't comply with an agreement, doesn't do what they were required to do. When I first heard that, I thought it was unusual given the short duration of the marriage, the fact that they've been divorced for a long time. They don't share kids. As far as I know, they don't share custody of pets. And so I really thought it was odd that there would have been any post-judgment litigation unless there was some sort of obligation in their settlement agreement that he or she had violated. So when I looked at the docket, I saw the first entry in 2025 just said continuance. And that was odd because I would expect to see before that, like I said, some sort of a filing before just noting like a continuance, which is essentially, a delay of an event, of a hearing or a trial or whatever. And then the entries after that, they say original copy of hearing notice filed and then strike schedule date. So what I believe could have been the case is that this was simply a clerical error and that it was misdocketed like from another case.
Okay, this woman is Brian Enton's great friend. We all know and love and trust Brian Enton. Do you think this was simply a clerical error? And this case is one error after another with the police officer going to the wrong house, the 911 operator just being so lackadaisy when the calls first came in, and now a clerical error in their file? Or do you think, as we continue to listen here, as she says, the other possibility is, and the really only other possibility would have been if Monique was being stalked by Michael McKee, but she also mentions why this is not the best route for Monique to have gone if that was the case. So let me know what you think after this next clip. Do you think Michael McKee was stalking Monique and Spencer Tepe? And after this clip, we have another interesting short clip to show you that might help you decide that statement, decide the answer to that question, rather. Keep listening.
And that happens sometimes, right? Because when you have people manually inputting information, if they get one number of the case number wrong, it could result in, this appearing on the wrong docket. That's what I think happened, but I don't know for sure.
Likely a mistake, because why would this just pop up, 8 years later? But do these things, would they ever reopen a case like you said, it also says closed, which goes even more to your point that it is still closed, but What would come up where something legit would reopen a file like this, like 8 years later? Does that ever happen?
I wouldn't see that often. Usually, post-judgment litigation has to do with like if you have a support obligation, which I don't believe there was any here, given that they don't share kids and it was a short, duration of the marriage, or if like one of them was supposed to transfer property to the other and failed to do that, or which would have probably been the most likely scenario here, like if they, a lot of people have been talking about this mutual restraining order. And I think they are reading more into that than what it is because of the word restraining order. Here in Florida, that would mean like you can't be within, a certain amount of feet of someone. But in Ohio, I've just learned from, watching TV and listening, to other people talk about this case that that's just like an automatic thing, and it prevents both of them from like harassing each other, meddling into each other's business. And neither of them have to ask for that. It's just automatic. But that would have been the only scenario that I could see post-judgment litigation arising here if one of them had somehow violated that restraining order. And for instance, if he was like harassing her or, vice versa, then I could see possibly something happening. But even then, I don't think she would have filed something in the divorce case in Ohio. I think she would have gone down to the police station or the courthouse and gotten an actual restraining order, which would include like stalking, harassment, even if it's like text messages or on social media, you would still go get an actual restraining order.
That makes complete sense to me. That if they were being stalked, that she would call and get a restraining order versus going back to the court. What do you think? I mean, it's really hard to say here. Really hard to say, especially with the little video clip of possible thought processes that one creator put into after this. Stay tuned. Keep watching.
So the restraining order listed in the divorce case is just standard in Ohio, it seems.
It's
not a real restraining order, like you can't come within 10 feet of me.
Correct.
Okay. So going back to the beginning of the record from when this all started back in 2017, what stands out to you? I mean, does it seem like a fairly basic divorce?
It seems like the most basic divorce. There was as far as I can see, there was no motion practice. Even though that I heard that they were together for several years before getting married, they were married for less than a year. Basically, after she filed, because she was the petitioner, the case was closed within 2 months. So I assume during that time, maybe they were making some financial disclosures to each other and agreeing on a property settlement agreement. They could have been working with a mediator during that time or some sort of a neutral third party, but there's really nothing that sticks out to me. I believe that he did not have a lawyer, and I think that she did have a lawyer. So her lawyer would have been dealing with him. And, I don't know how much property they could have accumulated during the short duration of the marriage, but that really would have been the only thing that they could have been doing other than, complying with like requisite paperwork that the court requires in order for them to get divorced.
Something else I saw on Twitter, Ashley, is some people are picking up on this line where it says domestic violence shelter. And some people are like, oh my gosh, look, that shows there was domestic violence. But it seems like almost like just a fee that maybe anyone getting divorced has to pay. Is that right?
That's what it looks like to me, just because it seems like a fee, and the docket is reflecting like the allocation of where that fee goes. Domestic violence shelter, child abuse, like that, they didn't have children, court computerization, legal aid. This seems like they're just, for whatever reason, because we don't do that here, they're allocating where the payment is going. Like in Miami, it's around $400 to file for divorce for the court to process the paperwork. I have no idea where that money goes.
Yeah, maybe something like this.
I think that's what this could be. But I don't think it has I don't think this means that, Monique was in a domestic violence shelter or anything like that.
We've heard that they use what's being called like a private judge. What does that mean? And is that common for couples to use?
So typically, private judges are used when you have two very high profile people who, want to keep their business out of the media. You see it a lot with celebrities, in Los Angeles, actors, actresses. I think Brad and Angelina had a private judge. We've had it. I've used private judges because it's first of all, a private judge you have to pay. So it's like paying another lawyer.
This just begs the question, why did they use a private judge? Such an interesting case. And it just, if we believe what this woman is saying, which seems logical, that these were clerical errors, what are the odds that this case is just a comedy of, not funny, comical at all, but a comedy of errors with the 911 operator, the police going to the wrong address, a potential clerical error in the file? I mean, it's just wild to think of. We're almost done this one. We're going to get to another brief clip. So you can answer the question today, whether or not you think Michael Tepe, or Michael McKee rather, was stalking Monique and Spencer Tepe.
Another advantage of it is that if you have many issues in dispute and a large marital estate, you get quicker hearings. It sort of expedites the process. You know, the court system here in Miami is so backed up that sometimes, you know, I file a motion and for my client, it's an emergency. And then I have to go back and tell them, I can't get you a hearing for 6 months. And so a private judge, you know, they're not bogged down with all the cases, you know, and so they can really devote more time and attention to your matter, and it can expedite things and also keep things out of the public eye. This would not be a case that I would ever think would have a private judge. That could have a different meaning in Ohio, for instance, like because it was a shorter duration of marriage, and I don't believe that they accumulated significant marital property during their marriage. Maybe it's equivalent to like a mediator to help them resolve things. I really don't know. Or maybe it's like an alternate judge. Sometimes the judge sitting in the division has too much on their caseload, so they'll refer certain matters, usually post-judgment, but sometimes child-related matters, they'll refer to a magistrate who's like a junior judge, so to say. And sometimes retired judges will, you know, in some divisions, you know, be available to help, you know, adjudicate these like smaller things that might come up. I really don't know, but private judge is sort of odd, in my opinion, in this situation, just because they don't seem like two people who would need a private judge.
It seems like such a clean and basic divorce based on the record, even though we can't read all the supplements. I'm just curious, with clients that you've had, could there have been a lot of drama behind the scenes? Could there have been abuse, and that's just not reflected in the divorce paperwork?
100%. So, you know, Florida is a no-fault state, and you know, unless if, for instance, a common example is like infidelity, and people think, you know, if someone cheats on someone, there's going to be some sort of a penalty in a divorce. You know, infidelity doesn't matter in a divorce unless marital funds were expended in connection with that affair. So if you went on like took your girlfriend or boyfriend on a big trip or bought expensive gifts, then it would factor into it. However, like I've had short-term marriages where a lot of drama has occurred and it has a hefty docket, but you know, a lot of times when people are married for a short period of time, something happens and they realize that they don't want to be in this marriage anymore and they just want to get out as quickly as possible. And so they're not looking to, you know, spend money on legal fees. It's more like personal, emotional, and things that really don't factor into a divorce, right? Like really in this case, it should just be about the distribution of property, like separating any marital assets from non-marital assets. If they owned a house together or an apartment, who's going to stay in the house? How is, you know, are they going to sell it? Is one person going to buy the other out? Stuff like that. Of course, there could be behind the scenes a lot of emotional things, but you wouldn't really in a marriage like this where there's no children and it's a short-term marriage, to the extent there was like emotional or physical abuse, you wouldn't really detail that in any of the paperwork that was filed. So there could be a lot of stuff that happened that led up to this divorce, but there would just be no real reason to detail it.
No real reason to detail it in the paperwork. What do you think? Is this interesting that Michael McKee chose to represent himself to save money from an attorney, which apparently didn't have a lot of. He had student debt, and we've already covered here, Monique bought her own rings, but they would pay for a private judge. It just seems a little interesting. What are your thoughts on that below as we finish up here and move on to the next little clip to help you answer the question?
Divorce filing.
And also, we don't know
on whether or not Michael McKee stalked Monique and Spencer Tepe.
If he was abusive to her, obviously, but if he was and she just wanted to get out, with people you represent, with women you represent, if they just want to get out,
Yes.
is it sometimes easier to just make a clean break, keep the divorce
Yes.
simple? Could that have been what happened here?
100%. And I suspect that it was like, you know, she, from by all accounts, was like, you know, I think I know she wasn't working after she had kids, but she used to work. She, I think, did well for herself. She wasn't relying on him for financial support. I think he was a resident and not making much money at the time that they were married. So 100%. And, but, you know, it takes two to accomplish that. So you have, clients always tell me like, this should be quick. This should be easy. Like, how long do you think this can take? And I'm always like, I can't make that prediction because it ultimately depends on who you're married to and who they hire. That's going to impact the outcome of your case. But like in this case, he didn't have a lawyer. He didn't feel the need to get one. And it was done in 2 months. And so it really just feels like they came to an agreement on everything. And they were both, you know, they were both trying to achieve the same goal. It seems to get it over with as soon as possible.
Done in 2 months. Well, we heard differently. We heard 2 years. So I'm not really clear on whether or not it was 2 months or 2 years. But let's watch something else to give you pause. Did Michael McKee really stalk Monique Tepe? Okay, we're going to watch a short clip from Truth and Transparency and what she discovered about a possible location Michael McKee could have rented an Airbnb. And then we're going to go listen to a criminal behavior analyst on whether or not the Tepes were stalked by Michael McKee. Let's watch.
Dry run of the crime. So assuming that he drove, and he is the man, he drove from Rockford to Columbus, commits the crime, and comes back. You're looking at, if you just take the time alone that it would take and you don't get out of the vehicle, which is impossible, but we're going to go ahead and say 6 hours and 48 minutes, times that by 2. Okay. For easy math here, we're just going to go ahead and say 12 and a half hours. But again, that is not getting out of a vehicle. And you're going to have to get out of a vehicle if you want to fill it up with gas. You could pack, even if you put your gas in 2 gas cans, put them in your car, put them in your trunk, regardless. And then you could pack with your water bottles and your snacks, all great. But you're still going to have to stop. Then to commit the crime, okay? Wherever it is that you're going to need to park, and they're going to be walking, same thing, walking back to where you parked. And so if you're just going to do this, it's going to take you at least, again, just driving time, 13 hours, not including anything else. And that's me stopping to get out of my vehicle on the side of the road and put gas in it. That's not stopping to use the bathroom. That's not stopping to get food or anything like that. Now, if you're going to commit this crime and know where they live, how you're going to get in, planning and plotting it all out, I think it would behoove the Columbus Police Department to look into, and I'm just going to show something here for tracking purposes here. So back in the day here, Franklin County, Columbus Police Division, the Columbus Division of Police received a state grant for automated license plate reader technology in 2024. The agency signed a 5-year contract in 2022 with Axon that includes more than 2,000 body-worn cameras and 460 in-car camera systems with automated license plate recognition. Again, that started in 2022. Next. Okay. It is now a fact. It is now a fact that one of these cameras that was down there on the corner of 8th and 4th, right where their house is, see where it says 1407 there? The house that's next to it is 1411. That's their house. On that pole that's mounted, one of those cameras right there is a flock camera. We're going to go into more of that in the next episode, but wanted to have it up so I can point out to you guys. We're going to go into more of that. Now, let's see, we're going to pull up Airbnbs. Here we go. And would you believe this? Okay. Okay. If you look at picture 5 right here, all the way to the right-hand corner up and to the right, you will see that this Airbnb that is directly across the street, catty corner, you can see the Tepe's home. It is the second house right there on the corner. This is an Airbnb that's, again, it's across the street, just down, like you could see where the dot is. And then if you look up there in the corner, zoom in, that's their home. I was looking to see, because of Ohio State and we have sporting events all the time, a lot of people bought.
Right here. So you can see the Airbnb with the red icon here on top. And if you look to the right on the screen, across the street on the opposite corner is the Tepe's home. Right there. Right here. Literally. This was an Airbnb. Let's keep watching for a few more minutes and you tell me whether you think that he could have been there across the street and rented that Airbnb. We know he drove, excuse me, a long distance to get there from Illinois. What do you think? Let's watch for another couple minutes, and then we have an expert talking about this.
Places down around these areas, and then would Airbnb them, okay? And they would redo, they gutted them, they redid them, and they're beautiful. Like this one right here goes for $239 a night, okay? So I wanted to see how many were in the area of the home. And so when I did this, I said, no freaking way. This one, again, this is a different angle of the street. But it is one of the duplexes that's literally across the street. And just, you can see the complexes then that just, it's literally, you could throw a snowball and make it almost at the house, because I mean, everything's like closer down there. But that's 4th right there. And that's another look at the house that you'd be Airbnb-ing. There you go. Look at this. It's facing their home, and it's literally right across the street. See how this one's all fixed up? Looks nice. And in the back, you could park back here in the back of the house. And let's go into the living area of the kitchen. So like, see, like they redid everything. I mean, this place looks fabulous. But anyways, $239 per night. Again, because you're so close to the campus, you're so close to the bar. I mean, High Street. But hot damn to rent this out for $239 a night. Anyways, I was just looking at the area, and this is literally, you can see and watch everything happening from their house.
Do you think he was there across the street? Do you think he was there across the street? I don't know. It's a fetch. It's a definite fetch, stretch. But it could be. It could be. Listen up now for our last video on this dive on Dr. McKee, Michael McKee, and whether he stalked. And let me know whether you think he was stalking Monique and Spencer Tepe. Listen up.
Richards, former investigator at New Scotland Yard and host of the podcast's Crime Analyst and Real Crime Profile. Laura, thank you so much for being on. It's great to talk to you. You have this expression that I am fascinated to talk about. You say stalking is murder in slow motion. Take it from there.
Yes, well, thank you for having me on. And I use the term murder in slow motion because I've reviewed and worked so many different cases where there's a drip, drip, drip before the murder. And I mean a drip, drip, drip of controlling and abusive behavior. And then we have the homicide event. And often people don't see the psychological and the emotional. People look for physical abuse. But what I often see is that coercive control and stalking, they're the biggest indicators of a murder in slow motion and escalation when a rejected or vengeful ex-partner wants to take revenge on a former partner. So we can see this behavior within the relationship too, and sometimes we call it stalking and coercive control within the relationship. But the post-separation abuse, that's when it tends to escalate.
Okay, that's where I want to jump in. And I keep referring to this case as he's innocent until proven guilty. He's only just been brought before a judge for a 1-minute appearance. There's so much more still ahead in this case. But you've said that the separation step is the most dangerous time for domestic violence. Tell me about your experiences.
Yeah, so what we see is that 76% of women who are murdered by a former partner, they're murdered at the point of separation. So we know that it's a high risk factor. And we also know with jealous and controlling behavior, that's the biggest indicator towards a femicide. And so people look for physical violence, but actually it's the coercive control and the jealous behavior that is a far greater marker. And at the point of separation, this notion of if I can't have you, no one can.
At the point of separation, and now we're talking 8 years after the divorce is finalized. Wow. So typically this would be at the point of separation. Let's keep listening.
That's the tipping point where a man, and it's often a man, it's when women leave men, and they can bide their time too. We do see a lot of the murders happen within the first month and the first 6 months, but I've also seen cases where it looks like a hiatus of even 8 years, but actually there's been a lot of behavior going on within that period of time.
Well, that's fascinating to me because so far we've uncovered no evidence of physical stalking or cyber stalking, but I just can bet your bottom dollar that that's exactly what detectives are finding out now, having probably seized all forms of electronics in his apartment, his place of work, even a girlfriend or a friend he may have had where he had access to electronics. And so, and of course, the Tepe's electronics will have been there as well, unless they were stolen as the killer left the home. But I do want to say, like, the family says, yes, he was emotionally abusive. Yes, he made death threats, but there was no known physical abuse. So I'm just so curious about your take on something that, you know, could fester for a decade, that never was physically abusive, but that could, if he's guilty, yield such incredible violence.
Well, that's exactly what I'm saying. All of my research and analysis and what we know with domestic abuse, there's a term called coercive control. And it's actually the coercive and controlling behavior, the emotional abuse, the psychological abuse that underpins it. They're the tactics that are used. They're the far more significant indicators of an escalation to femicide. And that's why we mustn't just look for physical abuse. That is not the most significant indicator that something may well escalate. So we have to change what we look for. And equally, you know, when we think about they were together for 8 months and then she separated and she filed for divorce, Monique did, in 2017, but they were only together for 8 months, a very short marriage. So I want to know what was going on in that marriage, and equally what happened to trigger her to move out. The filing said that they were incompatible, but something for me, there's something much more significant there going on. But like I said, the coercive and controlling behavior, we know that he's a surgeon. I've had many cases where someone is a surgeon, a doctor, a pilot, where they are very controlling personalities, control freaks. That's the biggest indicator of harm to women.
Yeah,
Thank you for
Control freaks. And she also said that we have to change the way we look at these things. That just because we didn't see or have proof or evidence of abuse at the time Monique left Dr. Michael McKee doesn't mean it didn't exist. So thank you for being here today. Please help the channel grow. Do all the YouTube-y things. Like, subscribe, click on the notification bell so you can be here during our next live or deep dive at Motive.Means.Opportunity True Crime. And let me know whether you think Michael McKee stalked Monique and Spencer Tepe. Love and light.